You step into a palace of light. Crystal chandeliers burn above you like captured stars, silks whisper across marble floors, and the air is sweet, almost intoxicating. Yet the sweetness is wrong. It clings to your tongue like rot beneath roses, a perfume so thick it feels alive. You breathe again, and beneath the lavender and musk, you smell the truth. Unwashed skin, old sweat, the faint, sour memory of decay. Before we begin, take a breath, if you dare. History's most powerful women lived amid this perfumed rot, wrapped in rituals that glittered as they poisoned. If you love uncovering the hidden realities behind royal beauty, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. Tell us where in the world you're watching from. It's wild to think that from palaces in France to homes across continents today, we're all gathered to peel back the same layers of illusion. Now, step deeper into the scent. The palaces of Europe were never truly clean. Versailles shimmered under candlelight, but behind its gold leaf walls, chamber pots overflowed, and courtiers stepped delicately over puddles of urine left by servants too overworked to notice. The smell of humanity hung thick, veiled beneath waves of ambergris, civet, and rosewater. A noblewoman's worth could be measured not by how she washed, but by how she hid the fact she never did. Clean skin, after all, belonged to laborers and laundresses. Royals needed something divine, something unnatural. Perfume became armor. Each morning, attendants swarmed around queens and duchesses, brushing powders of crushed iris and violet into their wigs, dabbing oil onto the wrists, chest, and behind the ears. The ritual was almost religious. When Marie Antoinette entered her chambers, the air would change. Her personal perfumer, Jean-Louis Fargeon, prepared scents of orange blossom and jasmine to mark her passage through the corridors. To breathe her fragrance was to know her power. But beneath the lace and oil, her body rebelled. Her skin, sealed under layers of powder, could not breathe. Her gowns, heavy with silk and whalebone, were rarely changed. She would sit for hours in heat and sweat, her flesh pressed against fabric that had not seen water in weeks. The odor of the human body, once ashamed to acknowledge, was redefined as the smell of royalty itself. To mask decay became a mark of civilization. Even architecture conspired in this masquerade. The grand halls of palaces were designed for spectacle, not sanitation. Windows were sealed against drafts that were thought to carry illness, trapping the air in stagnant stillness. Carpets absorbed the stink of chamber pots. Walls, painted with gold leaf and oil varnish, reflected light but trapped smoke. At night, the candles hissed, the scent of tallow mixing with sweat and perfume until the atmosphere itself grew heavy, almost narcotic. Visitors fainted not from awe, but from the fumes. Elizabeth Thurifer's court carried this same perfume of contradiction. The Virgin Queen, immaculate in her pearl-draped gowns, was rumored to bathe once a month, whether she needed it or not. Her skin, whitened with lead-based ceruse, cracked under the weight of its own purity. Servants described the smell of her cosmetics, a faint metallic tang beneath the rosewater. Yet she clung to it. To be pale was to be pure, untouched by labor or sunlight. The Queen's face became a canvas of divine decay. When one ambassador commented on her scent, Elizabeth smiled coolly and replied, "The lily has no need to prove its fragrance." He would later note in his letters the curious heaviness of air in her presence. That heaviness was death itself, distilled into powder. The paradox ran deeper still. To the nobility, water was dangerous, believed to open the pores and let sickness in. Physicians warned against it. So they washed only what could be seen: the hands, the face, the décolletage. Everything else was concealed beneath linen shifts that absorbed the body's oils until they turned dark and stiff. The same fabric that once touched the Queen's skin might later crawl with lice, perfumed again before the next royal audience. Perfume houses thrived in this world of beautiful rot. Civet, extracted from the glands of wildcats, gave depth to a lady's scent. Ambergris, coughed up by whales, lent sweetness. These were not merely indulgences, they were declarations of class. To smell strongly was to announce you were untouchable, removed from the ordinary stench of work and the poor. The olfactory hierarchy ruled as rigidly as bloodlines. Imagine a ballroom in Versailles at the height of summer. Hundreds of bodies move as one, silk grinding against silk, wigs towering like clouds of powder. The chandeliers drip wax, and beneath them, the scent of bodies, sweet, musky, and faintly rancid, fills every breath. Perfume doesn't conceal it, it transforms it, turning corruption into art. Courtiers whisper compliments, oblivious that what they praise as sophistication is, quite literally, the smell of decay. Outside, peasants scrub themselves in cold streams. Inside, queens drown in their own fragrance. The illusion of cleanliness became a theater that demanded constant maintenance, an endless performance against the natural truths of the body. In the pursuit of divine beauty, royal women waged war against their own flesh, masking, sealing, and suffocating themselves beneath powders and perfumes until their very pores forgot how to breathe. And yet, it worked, for a time. The scent of a queen could command loyalty, fear, even love. But every perfume fades. Beneath the amber and rose lingered the truth of mortality. The palaces that sparkled like heaven were built on the slow rot of the human form, disguised as grace. In the end, the air itself became a mirror, reflecting not their purity, but their decay. And as we move deeper into their world, the question lingers like a ghostly fragrance. In masking the stench of life, did these women ever truly live at all? At dawn, the queen's chamber stirs. Curtains heavy with dust part to reveal a pale shape at her mirror. A dozen hands hover, powder, brush, rouge, transforming flesh into porcelain. The ritual begins in silence, save for the rasp of lead paste spreading across her face. A soft hiss as breath catches beneath her corset. Somewhere, a fly lands on a silver comb and dies. Beauty, for the royal woman, was not indulgence, it was duty. Each morning, her skin became the battlefield where power and poison met. In Tudor England, in Bourbon France, in Habsburg Spain, the same performance unfolded. The whitening of the face, the sealing of pores, the slow sacrifice of the body to the altar of appearance. To appear divine, one had to suffer beautifully. Venetian ceruse, whispered one attendant as if naming a holy relic. The paste gleamed white as bone, mixed from vinegar and lead carbonate. It promised purity and erased imperfection, but beneath the illusion, the skin blistered, peeled, and burned. Physicians warned of its corrosion, yet no queen could abandon it, not when the color of her flesh spoke louder than decrees or armies. Pallor was politics. A face untouched by sun proved one's blood was untouched by labor. Elizabeth, I understood this better than anyone. In portraits, her skin shines with an unearthly glow, a mask of immortality. Yet those who saw her in private wrote of sores hidden beneath the powder, of the queen's trembling hand as she demanded another layer be applied. The people must never see decay, she once told her maids. And so they didn't. They saw the Virgin Queen, radiant, untouchable, while beneath the surface her body quietly surrendered to the toxins that sustained her throne. The air in her chambers was thick with the tang of vinegar and oil. Mirrors reflected her from all sides, turning her into a ghost before her own eyes. Beneath her gown, whalebone corsetry dug into her ribs until she could barely draw breath. A servant once fainted while tightening it, her own fingers bruised from the effort. Yet Elizabeth endured, as did every royal woman after her. Pain was proof of control. At Versailles, the art of suffering evolved into spectacle. Courtiers praised the queen's flawless skin without knowing it was painted with death. The cosmetics of the age read like an apothecary's nightmare. Arsenic for luminosity, mercury for brightness, crushed pearls and vinegar for eternal youth. Beneath the glitter, teeth blackened, gums receded, and hair fell out in clumps. Still, the masquerade continued. To appear weak, to show the naked truth of the body, was to fall from grace. And so, the daily funerals of flesh went on. A face covered in white to hide its rot, lips stained red with cochineal to suggest vitality stolen from blood, fingers trembling not from age but from mercury tremors. Each royal toilette was a ceremony of denial, an act of devotion to the illusion of eternal youth. What must it have felt like to watch yourself disappear, to look into a mirror and see not the woman you were, but the idea others demanded you become? The queens of Europe learned to smile through the cracking mask, to ignore the sting of lead in their lungs, to pretend that beauty did not ache. Their mirrors were altars, their powders, poison prayers. By night, when the candles burned low and the perfumes dulled, they could not escape the sound, the faint, dry cracking of makeup as it split against their skin. They slept sitting upright, afraid the mask might flake and reveal the human beneath. Even their dreams were perfumed, unreal, suffocating. In the morning, they would rise again, greet the mirror, and resume the ritual. For beauty was not theirs to abandon. It was their inheritance, their curse, their crown. Their thrones glittered, their bodies rotted. There was a time when purity smelled of water, when steam rose from marble baths in Cordoba, and the air shimmered with lavender and mint. But centuries later, in the echoing halls of Christian Europe, the scent of water itself became suspect, too sensual, too foreign, too clean. The ritual of washing, once sacred, was recast as sin. And in the royal courts that ruled the world, dirt was no longer shame. It was salvation. It began with fear, fear of the body, of desire, of the corruption that came with flesh. The Church taught that to touch oneself with water was to awaken vanity, to court temptation. Monks wrote that the saints had conquered the body by letting it fester. One chronicler praised a nun who had not washed her feet in 30 years, declaring, "Her stench was a sign of grace." This was holiness rewritten through decay. By the time Isabella of Castile ascended her throne, that theology had hardened into weapon. In 1492, the same year Granada fell and the last Muslim rulers were driven from Spain, the Queen decreed a new order, one where dirt was divine and water was heretical. The Moors had built entire cities of cleanliness, fountains, hammams, aqueducts that sang with running water. To bathe was not only comfort, it was devotion. Cleanliness is half of faith, said the Prophet Muhammad, and for 8 centuries the Iberian Peninsula had glowed with that principle. Isabella saw it differently. To her, the bathhouse was a nest of sin, Muslim, sensual, feminine. So she closed them. The marble baths of Andalusia, where generations had cleansed body and spirit, were sealed with wax and crosses. Soldiers filled the fountains with rubble. The scent of jasmine was replaced with smoke. Those who still washed risked suspicion. Those who smelled too clean risked death. The Inquisition's interrogators were said to note the odor of their captives. If a prisoner's skin carried the scent of soap, it might be proof of secret faith. Across Spain, the queens and noblewomen followed suit. To bathe was to risk being mistaken for a heretic. The very substance that gave life, water, became an instrument of doubt. Within courtly circles, filth took on the weight of piety. The less one washed, the more one signaled devotion. Women perfumed their linens instead of cleansing them, layering musk and amber until the human beneath was all but erased. But superstition rarely stops at borders. When Spain's empire spread across the Atlantic, so too did this theology of filth. Indigenous peoples who bathed daily in rivers and sweat lodges were branded as pagan and indecent. European chroniclers wrote with disdain about naked savages who dared to be clean. In the colonies, washing became rebellion. an act of resistance against imported moral rot. The colonizers' sicknesses, born of unwashed bodies and stagnant air, ravaged the very populations they deemed impure. The irony was catastrophic. Even in the royal courts of France and England, Isabella's ghost lingered. Queens refused baths, fearing not just disease but scandal. Water, they believed, opened the pores to corruption. Physicians whispered of the dangers of bathing too often. It disturbed the humors, they said, or softened the will. Better to remain sealed beneath perfume and prayer. Thus the sickness of one court infected another. Cleanliness, once divine, was exiled from the throne. What did it mean for a civilization to fear purity? For power itself to be built on the rejection of the body? Perhaps that fear was never about hygiene at all, but control. Dirt united believers under one scent, the odor of obedience. It made subjects alike, indistinguishable in their decay. The clean, by contrast, stood out. They threatened the illusion of sanctity that filth sustained. In Isabella's palace, legend says the queen died without ever bathing fully. Her servants sponged her face with rosewater and wiped her hands, but her body, wrapped in silks and prayers, remained untouched. When she died, the attendants unwrapped the cloths and recoiled at what they found, the skin pale and waxen, the smell overpowering. "Even saints decay," one priest murmured, crossing himself as if to absolve the air. But it was not decay. It was the legacy she left behind. Across continents, the fear of the flesh would endure. The colonizers who refused to wash would infect new worlds. The noblewomen who feared the bath would pass their dread to daughters. And through it all, the myth would persist, that the body, in its natural state, was unholy, and that to cleanse it was to challenge God himself. The tragedy was not just in the filth of the body, but in the filth of the mind that sanctified it. Generations of queens, cloaked in perfume and prayer, taught their empires to mistake corruption for virtue. Their crowns shone with divine authority, but the kingdoms beneath them rotted. In fearing the corruption of the flesh, they had become its architects. And long after their palaces crumbled, their scent lingered. In the dust, in the water, in history's breath itself.